Today's forum is sponsored by our host, the Athletic Club of Columbus, represented by its president, Lisa Antolino. Lisa? And several of her staff. Lisa is the first woman to serve as president of the Athletic Club of Columbus. She is director of learning and development for executive education at Fisher College at Ohio State University. Let's thank the Athletic Club for its sponsorship and all they do throughout the year, and welcome Lisa to the stage. Thank you, Lisa. Good to see you. Yeah.
Well, I just want to point out one thing before we start. If you look up, we have the most beautiful ceiling, and there is no glass on it. On behalf of the Athletic Club Columbus, and I'd like to just thank our general manager, Paul Kroll, and all the wonderful work he and his entire team who's sitting over here do, as well as I wanted to mention we have a few of our board members, Tim D'Angelo and Carla Sokol, and we really value, feel free to apply. We truly value the partnership that we have with the Columbus Metropolitan Club, and we appreciate seeing you here for all the forums that you have. And many of you who are coming here on a regular basis may be aware that this is the 100th year of our organization, and we're inordinately proud of that endurance that we've had over time and a long-standing institution. And our building itself here is 95 years old. So it's quite a remarkable place, and in the very room you're sitting now over the years have been celebrities, U.S. presidents, and accomplished athletes. So we're really pleased at the history that we have here in our organization. And today, of course, there's another history that's taking place. We have the historic first Chief of Police in Kimberly Jacobs, and we're just thrilled to welcome her into our organization. And I'm going to spare you any kind of introduction. You certainly can see that in the program that you have there, and I don't want to steal any of Cabot's thunder as he goes through some of his questions. But we're just thrilled to be able to sponsor this event. And I'm thrilled also to have Cabot Ray here. He comes to my house every night, so I just love seeing him here. Well, on behalf of the Columbus Athletic Club, we really appreciate your being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Very wonderful having the opportunity to be with you here today. I know that Colleen has done a number of these over the years. Colleen is on vacation this week. I spoke with her last night. She's down in North Carolina, and she's having a wonderful time. That's about all I'm going to say on that. But she's having a well-deserved break. She's a very, very busy woman as well. So I'm glad to be here representing NBC4. And I will turn on my mic. I was just getting the high side. These darn wireless mics. Problem is I've left them on sometimes when I've gone into places that I didn't really want it to be on, AKA the bathroom. But we won't go any further than that. So it is on now. This mic is officially on. Honored to be here today to see you again. I had a chance to reconnect with some people that I haven't spoken with in many years, but it's great really to be here, obviously, to focus on this wonderful person to my right here. We're going to go through some questions. I'm going to ask her some questions, and then we're going to open the floor up towards the end to allow you to do some questions if you might have a question for the new police chief. But also remember that this is being put over the air, and so keep your questions short. No stand-up routine, no long monologues or editorial comments. If you can, just keep your questions short and concise so that we can move through that quickly. Appreciate that. Well, first of all, as you know, perhaps you do, you should know probably, that back in early April, another historic first for our city here and leadership here in Columbus. Mayor Coleman introduced Kimberly Jacobs as Chief of Police. Jacobs, the 32nd police chief in the history of our fine city, but of course, as we all know by now, she the first female to become Chief of Police in Columbus. Now, you may also know some of the history, some of the bullet points of her life in terms of with the police academy. I've learned a few things about her just in the last 20 minutes that I found very intriguing as well. But just a couple of the highlights. In 1979, she began as a patrol officer, pretty much on the west side of town, right? That was your first beat in 1979. Also, in 1987, she was promoted to sergeant. And in 1995, she was the first woman in division history to be promoted to commander. Am I pretty much right on the dates?
You're right on.
Excellent. In 2009, she was the first to be promoted, the first female to be promoted to deputy chief. So she just keeps breaking through those barriers all the way to the top. Over the years, she has helped lead the reorganization of the internal affairs. She has created the Columbus Citizen Police Academy. She has helped also oversee the patrol staffing and the redistricting plan in hopes of improving response times in certain areas of the city in times of crisis. So again, congratulations and welcome, Chief. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
You may also know, or may not know, I just learned that she was a 4-year letter winner at Ohio State University in the hurdles. Is that right?
That's correct.
She ran Stephanie Hightower quite a bit
3 years.
for 3 years with Stephanie Hightower. And I grew up part of my life in Worcester, and really something that meant a lot to me. Her first job was at the Bell Avenue Car Wash in Worcester, Ohio. So that's strong. Right there, you went up
Absolutely.
here in my book. We're going to talk a few questions, talk about the background, talk about some things. Then we're going to get to some issues in the city that now you face as the chief of police here. First of all, obviously, you are an inspiration now to a lot of other women. But what inspired you? What got you on this path? What was it that drove you to want to get here today?
First of all, I wouldn't have even thought about joining law enforcement until I was actually recruited during my college years. It was in the mid-'70s when women were first being considered for a lot of things, getting into clubs, and clubs like this were starting. From feisty women, and so they were looking for women in the highway patrol at that time, and a lieutenant from a highway patrol actually came up and asked me if I had ever considered law enforcement, and I had not, because I grew up in Ashland. It was a small town. We didn't have any females to ever see, but women just weren't in law enforcement, or if they were, they weren't visible. So got recruited, came back to Ohio State for my junior and senior year, changed my major to sociology, and started going on ride-alongs. One of my professors, Professor Lundman, who's still teaching, encourages his students to go on ride-alongs and find out about policing. And one of the stories that he told was about Chicago cops that were fairly corrupt in his belief back then in the old days. So I thought that policing needed to be a more noble profession. And as I learned more about it, I thought that's what I want to do. And my parents were both in service to others. My mom was a nurse who rose through the ranks, believe it or not. I followed in her footsteps and became the director of nurses at Samaritan Hospital in Ashland. And my father was an county extension agent who worked through the Ohio State University extension program and helped farmers figure out how they could grow better crops and deal with some of the issues that farmers face. So that line of service, I think, is what got me so highly motivated, I guess, and enthusiastic about helping others. And the more that I got into it, after I got hired and got into the academy, it's one of those things that you just kind of get motivated to do, is to help others, and they show you how, and assure you that you can do it in the face of danger and all those things. So I think my work continues to encourage me. It's you get enough reward that you want to do more.
Obviously, and it's encouraging a lot of other women who may now be considering maybe a career also in law enforcement, huh?
I certainly hope so. One of the things that I had to face when I was brand new was that I was the only female that would be working my shift in my area of town. So on the west side, I would probably be the only female out there, and if a woman got arrested, I would have to drive wherever to go do the arrest and the search and all of that. And it was very few and far between, and women weren't able to even network back then because we were on different shifts with different days off, and we didn't see each other. So I certainly believe that women have added an awful lot to the Division of Police. Any kind of diversity adds a lot to the Division of Police. We need to reflect our community. So it was very important to me that we continue to add to those numbers. We are very underrepresented in Columbus. We have about 11% females in our division, and I'd like to see it a lot higher than that.
Okay. We are taking now, so we've been taking some questions on our Facebook page at NBC4i.com. People writing in, viewers, we invited them to do that so that we could pass questions along. And this is one of those questions. It comes from a Jennifer Colvin, who says, I know we like to think that times have changed, but what is it like being a female police chief in what is perceived to be a male-dominated environment?
I don't think perceived is.
I think that was her ability to soft sell it just a little bit, but so she says, but the comment is, she says times, she believes, though, for all the talk that times have changed,
Right.
still are there challenges being at the top as a woman?
I don't feel those types of challenges myself. Early on, I faced some people that did not believe that females should be police officers. My grandmother, God bless her, thought the same thing and told me so after I'd been a police officer. Yeah, I think it's a matter of changing people's perspective on what women are able to do, and I think we've done that now. There might still be a little bit of, you have to kind of prove yourself as a woman. I think men, it's assumed that you're able to do it until you prove otherwise. And for some women, it's, you have to prove yourself, because the gender thing becomes an issue in some people's minds. But it was that way with the public as well. I mean, some citizens actually told me, honey, now you better call somebody else to help you out, you know. That was a long time ago.
We're going to move now quickly to kind of a topical question that just in the last few days, and to get your reaction to this, you know, just after you were sworn in, you mentioned how important trust is with you and continuing to build the sense of trust between police and the community. Just this week, the story has broken that you have, in fact, launched an investigation into a department, make sure that I get this right, Defense Reutilization Marketing Office, over potential irregularities in handling of some government surplus that was donated to the department, and accountability as to where all that went. How important is it that you be very decisive now in one of these early challenges in your department?
If people didn't already know this about me, they should know this about me, and that I do the right thing for the right reasons in the right way. And I am a curious person by nature. I like to know why we do things, how we do them, and so my nature is to go out and find out how we're doing, and if we're following all the rules and where we stand. And I've done that historically throughout my career as the chief. Of course, I want to know more about everything. I've been asking questions about many, many different things. When I asked questions about this particular program, I found some answers that I wasn't very comfortable with, and therefore we launched the investigation. It's imperative to me that you understand that your tax dollars are not being wasted and that we're doing things the right way. You must trust that we're doing things in your benefit and not taking advantage of our position. So that is why that investigation is ongoing.
Yeah, I know that a couple of officers have been at least relieved of duty at this point, and you're continuing on with the investigation there. So I know it's important that you get to the bottom of everything probably as quickly as possible, obviously. Yes. A couple of years back, you were also instrumental in redistricting the precincts and the manpower in an attempt to, as I mentioned earlier, to improve response times in times of crisis in certain areas of the city. 2 years later, give or take, have you seen an improvement there? Is there an improvement in response time after the redistricting?
Absolutely, with regard to having people closer to the calls. We talked about adding a new precinct to the far east side and the far north side back in 1996. And for various reasons, we just never got around to doing it, whether it was staffing, whether it was just the effort that it took, whether people understood that it was going to be a kind of monumental thing. But finally, we undertook that in 2009 and got it implemented in July of 10. And we now have officers that have a smaller district to work on. That improves our response times. And we're monitoring it all the time. No staffing plan that deploys 1,900 people should be stagnant. And so we're constantly looking at that. We've already evaluated it and made some changes to it subsequent to the July 2010 implementation. And we continue to look at it every year, if not more often than that.
I know that, for instance, the Short North recently has been really targeted in areas of burglary, a lot of people breaking in to steal scrap metal or to sell it as scrap. Campus area is always, just off campus is always an issue there. Come in? So is this a fluid situation when, say, like in the Short North, if some shop owners think they're not getting enough coverage, You adjust coverages with your officers?
And that would depend on if it's a long-term problem or a short-term problem.
Right.
We have squads of officers that are available to deal with short-term problems. And we have directed patrols that we do anytime a problem creeps up, and we try to address it as quickly as possible. The deployment of officers is based on long-term ongoing needs. You know, we just annexed land in the south of Columbus. We annexed land on the west side of Columbus. We don't know what the demands will be yet, so we won't deploy until we see what they actually are.
Okay.
We don't have enough to do it in anticipation of problems.
One of our viewers also emailed us this question. As you just mentioned, about 1,900 sworn officers now that under you with the division. Of those 1,900, it's about 1,000 that are on the streets. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, about 60% of our sworn personnel are assigned to patrol positions.
There has been, I have heard from time to time, and in fact this viewer was saying, what about the perception that the division is a bit top-heavy with a lot of executives, a lot of top chiefs and assistant deputy chiefs and all of that versus the numbers that are actually out there on the street? What's your reaction to that comment that the department might be viewed as being top-heavy?
Well, we've actually downsized a little bit in some of our supervisory positions in the last couple of years. We stopped hiring in 2009 because of the recession, and we're still building back up. So we actually have downsized supervisory ranks to some degree in the last couple of years. And I'm always monitoring whether or not we have that. But as far as top-heavy, I would not describe it that way at this point in time. We have to have people in place to show leadership and to give guidance to our younger personnel and just anybody that's in an operational unit.
Okay. I've talked with a police officer who I know pretty well, and one of the questions I guess the rank and file has, and of course this always happens, any company that gets a new chief kind of wants to know, okay, what's going to happen now? And so one of the questions I got was, are there any major changes, any sweeping changes on the horizon that you can give us a little insight on within the department?
One of the first things that I got asked, or the rumor mill was out there that I was going to go to rotating shifts, and what they don't know is I'm one of the few people that actually had rotating shifts still on the department and hated it, so I had to put that rumor out right away.
Okay.
We did just recently restructure, though, and I put some more people under the patrol chain of command, basically, so that they would have a better connection there. Our Strategic Response Bureau now reports to a patrol deputy chief, so that those personnel have to pay attention to what patrol needs are. Because we have some plainclothes people, we added our community response teams to that unit so that they are in more coordination with each other. And just restructured a few of the different chains of command so that people have the resources available to them. Other than that, I'm going to make a few tweaks on the uniform policy, but I'm going to very much emphasize increasing our training, especially internally. We have, you know, one of the largest police departments in the country. We're in probably the top 20 as far as size. Columbus is the 15th largest city. Other agencies have bigger departments. So we're going to be looking at how we use our resources the most effectively and trying to deploy them with regard to the priorities that I will set for their responsibilities.
By the way, this officer spoke highly of you. But I'm not going to tell you his name. He did. He was happy with your appointment. So that's very good. Let's talk about now, as we look forward, with this city of Columbus, and of course everybody here loves this city, and we all feel it's a great place to live and grow up, but it's got some big city challenges, and in fact in recent years it seems as though we have become a major, almost hub for the heroin problem. How do you hope to try to attack that? Because heroin has become a major problem on the streets and in the suburbs, not just in Columbus. But it is becoming a real problem, and probably that's led to a lot of the crime, the burglaries, break-ins, probably robberies and assaults. So how do you hope to attack that issue?
Well, if you don't already know, the heroin trade is based in large part on people that get hooked on prescription drugs, and then that avenue gets cut off because the doctors won't give them the prescriptions, and so then they have to search for some other opiate to try to use to suit that addiction. And unfortunately, their children are also getting into the prescriptions and then getting hooked on heroin because it's a far cheaper way and easier way to get a hold of drugs. So one of the things that we have to do is education, as far as educating the public about their prescription drugs so they don't get started in the first place, and maybe asking some doctors to not prescribe an opiate every single time somebody has an ache and pain. But definitely we are watching that, and the drug dealers have found new ways of dealing things. You know, now with cell phones and all that, they make a connection, they make an appointment to sell their drugs instead of having large sums of drugs and large sums of money. They make a prescription or an appointment to actually do hand-on-hand, those kinds of things. But we are tracking that. We have officers predominantly assigned to heroin, but we also, I'm going to increase the number of people that will be looking at prescription drugs to try to deal with the abuse and the doctor shopping that they do.
That has become maybe the -- problem is prescription drug abuse.
Yes, it is. A lot of people die from overdoses of prescription drugs.
How about from your perspective, what do you see as maybe the biggest challenge Columbus, the community, faces within your realm, within your arena of jurisdiction? What do you see as the biggest challenge there?
Well, it kind of depends on how you want to look at it. As far as policing, it's a very expensive proposition. You know, the mayor never lets me forget. Safety is about 70% of the city's budget. And so it depends on what the taxpayers are willing to do as far as paying for their safety. I was at a Block Watch coordinators meeting last night, and you know, they asked us to deal with, you know, some of the quality of life, you know, issues that they face. And I'm like, but you don't really want a police officer to be in your neighborhood 24/7 because, first of all, people would be uncomfortable with that, and second of all, it's way too expensive. So we have to face the fact that policing is expensive. We need to look at how we can make it more affordable. And one of the things that I'm trying to find a method of doing that is what would be the level of acceptance that the public has with regard to not having a police officer take a report from them. You know, can we have a civilian take that report over the phone? Can you do your own report online? We have those options available to us. We've trained our officers to go out and fight crime, investigate crime, and arrest people, but they're spending a lot of time taking reports. And sometimes the report is just for the need for the insurance company. So we need to find a way to make policing more affordable for you and still protect your safety and give you that sense of safety that everybody wants to have.
And certainly some of the options I know that you may be looking also that you didn't mention, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in recent years we've done stories on surveillance cameras being put in some neighborhoods, some areas that are maybe considered hot spots. There hasn't been a great deal that I can see, a lot of backlash about that, but is that a program you might expand in an effort to kind of keep eyes where you can't be into other neighborhoods, other areas?
Yes, I do believe that cameras have had a big impact on crime. You know, crime has actually gone down nationwide for the last several years, 10 years almost. And I think that one of the reasons is cameras. We've got cameras in our cruisers, we've got cameras on our streets, and I think that's a good thing because people don't like the evidence being caught on film. Not film anymore.
We all still say that on digital card.
Exactly.
Yes.
But yeah, I do believe that we can increase the neighborhood cameras so that people feel safe in those areas, especially where we're trying to urge people to be out on the street and using the streets. You know, you go up and down High Street now and it's vibrant. And that's exactly what we want. We want people to use the streets so that, hey, those criminals aren't going to be comfortable because there's too many people out there using the streets in the right way. So I hope that we can use that. It's going to take some people off of my deployment, probably to watch those cameras, to monitor those, so that we can recognize crime, but I'm hoping that I can use maybe civilians instead of cops to do some of that.
So do you see maybe a few more cameras being installed in the next year or two in certain areas?
I do believe that that's the plan, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about an issue here that has been in the news also recently, and just to get your take, your perspective on it. Concealed carry. There has been a push of late to try to extend where people with permits can carry their weapon. There was talk about Ohio State, because as it stands, you can carry it around if you have a permit, but not on the grounds at Ohio State. And yet there is a push maybe to go onto the grounds, and maybe at some point even go into some of the buildings, which would be quite a shift. What's your thought about concealed carry? What's your thought overall about that challenge where you're weighing the right to defend yourself versus the overall public safety issue that goes along with that?
Well, I'm not a politician, but I certainly think that there are very few cases where people have actually used a concealed weapon to protect themselves. You know, they'll claim that they do, but it just doesn't happen too often. But the Constitution is what it is, and people are entitled to have the gun according to the Supreme Court. So it's just a matter of how do you use the weapon that you may or may not have. And I am very much aware that some people have weapons and try to deal with problems with a gun. And that generally happens the younger you are, because they just haven't gotten to the point where they value life enough, respect other people enough, and understand the consequences. You know, some people don't think more than a few minutes ahead of time. So we have to educate people about how they should use weapons. As far as concealed carry, you know, I'll let the judges and the courts and the legislators all decide who gets to do that, but I do think that if you are an organization, a business, or whatever, you should have the right to say whether or not you want a weapon in your premises.
Yeah, if you're a private business and
Yeah,
so forth.
absolutely.
Yeah. How are we doing on time here, gang? We doing okay? About 8 minutes? Okay. In 8 minutes or less, would you try to answer this question. What is the secret of life? No, that's not it at all. We took a number of questions, and one came to us from an Ed Reeves on our Facebook page, and he asked, how long do you plan to be chief? And I think he meant this in a positive thing. I believe that the question was kind of in reference to the fact that the last police chief wasn't there very long,
Right.
and kind of went through a quick transition in and out. So how about you?
Well, we've had an example of a very long chief
Yes.
for 19 years, Chief Jackson, and Chief Distelzweig was there for 3 years. But the city charter was changed during Chief Jackson's tenure, and now any police chief that gets appointed gets a 5-year term. And at the end of that 5 years, up to the mayor and the safety director to decide if they want another 5-year term. I can guarantee you that I can serve all 5 years of my term. And they will decide whether I can go more, and I can go more. So I'm hoping that I will have an opportunity to serve beyond the 5 years. I've got a lot of ideas, a lot of plans, and what's even better than that is I listen to other ideas. I trust that mine aren't the best ideas, that I know that there's a lot of brilliant ideas out there, not just within our agency, but outside of the agency. So it takes time to get them implemented, unfortunately. You know, budgets have to be set. If you're talking about hiring people, if you're talking about buying something, it takes a while to get through the system, and you know how the city works. It's a bureaucracy, so I'll have to deal with that. But certainly I am able to complete my 5-year term, and hope that it will be a little bit longer than that.
Well, I think there's a pretty good shot of that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Mean to. Let's talk about your emphasis on community patrols, I know, and getting the community involved. Of course, there was that recent, it's still in the controversy in Florida,
Correct.
where somebody on a citizen patrol used a weapon, actually, and a 19-year-old young man was killed. Well, the court sorted it all out, but the fact of the matter is that it's not something that you see ever being, or do you ever see it being instituted, obviously, in Columbus. I would say, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, block watches are wonderful things. That means that a group of people have organized in their neighborhood to fight crime, in the sense that they're willing to learn how to report crime, learn how to notice crime, learn how to recognize what's suspicious and what's not. You know, cops are trained to do that, and we try to give our block watch groups some of that information so that they'll be able to say, well, that car, I've never seen that before, maybe I should call, or that car comes here every day at this time. And well, sometimes that might mean they're buying drugs, but you know, otherwise, recognizing what's suspicious and what's not is important to teach our block watch people. What I say, and I said this last night at the block watch coordinators meeting, and one at the Far East Side not too long ago, is let us do our job. We are the cops. So call us when you see that suspicious behavior. What happened in Florida, unfortunately, was somebody that took action on his own and did not let the police handle that situation. And unfortunately, it had a tragic ending. And it then became an even worse problem in the sense that, well, maybe not worse, but a big problem in the community because of the lack of trust that the police department was handling it in the right way. And so that gets back to my desire to make sure that you trust us to do our job. call us when you need us. You know, don't try to do it yourself, but let us come in and handle those situations because we've got training and the weapons and the know-how and the authority to do that.
Excellent. You're doing very nicely. I'm telling you. I'm very impressed here so far. We're going to take time here in just a minute or two now to allow you to come up if you have a question, if something that has been addressed or maybe something that has not been addressed has tweaked your curiosity and you have a question that you would like to give to the police chief. That would be great because obviously she's proven she can hurdle just about anything I could throw at her. So let's see how she does with you. Okay, I guess we have our first question down front here.
I'm Carol McGuire. I'd like to thank you very much for coming today and,
Thanks,
and
Carol.
speaking with us. I think any time that we are in a leadership position, we certainly cast a look at others who are performing similar jobs and other cities and their practices regarding their police divisions. Are there some cities in this country that you look at with some aspiration of some of the practices that they already have in place? Are there some benchmarks that we should look at outside of our community that would improve what we're doing here?
Absolutely. Fortunately, I am able to join an organization called the Major City Chiefs Conference, and I go to these meetings now 2 or 3 times a year. And I was sitting at a table with approximately 50 to 60 other chiefs from large organizations. Unfortunately, right now I'm only the number 2, the second female. There's only 2 of us that are in this group of 70 major city chiefs. So I just had that meeting in the end of May, and I'm going to go to another one in the fall. But I heard from a lot of different agencies and how they deal with things, and you know, some cities are dealing with Occupy protests, and learning how they're handling it is a great opportunity to see what they do. I heard how Charlotte's going to handle the National Convention, how you know, other cities are dealing with things, but nonetheless you also get to network, and now I'm networking with people that have been dealing with, one chief is a 25-year chief, you know, and I said, I'm here 2 weeks, you know, 5 weeks, you know. So I'm able to talk to them and learn a lot from them. Charlotte is one of those cities that we look at frequently, but understand too that the Columbus Division of Police has been accredited now for about 15 years by the agency that accredits police agencies, and we're very proud of the fact that we try to follow best practices all the time, but we're constantly looking for who else is doing something better, and whether or not we can emulate that, whether it will work here, and how we could implement it. So yeah, I absolutely am glad to hear how other agencies do it, and just hope that I soon am joined by some other females. Sir.
Chief, I'm Michael Daniels. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Well, and so good to see you here. You've hit on the topic of diversity quite a bit today, and you've also hit on the topic of the community being able to trust the police force, and the police force then looking like the community. And
correct.
We know that Columbus is 52% female, 28% people of color, 15% gay and lesbian, and that the force doesn't look anything like that. What are you doing specifically in terms of both recruiting and maybe affinity within the department to try to increase the number of women, people of color, and gays and lesbians who serve the city?
Thank you. I've already set some goals with our recruiting sergeant as far as what I would like to see. It's very difficult to recruit for CPD because we don't do it the way it worked for me. Now you might take the test and it might be a year or 2 before you get actually hired, because we only do a class here every once in a while. But I approved some billboards that you might see around town that have 3 women on it. And I've given an awful lot of interviews and talk about the fact that we need to increase that. But as I have more opportunities, I'm going to be going out to different groups and telling them that we need to do that. Having a representative group is important. I talk to our recruits all the time. We have a cultural diversity class in the academy where we bring in Bravo, we bring in you know, somebody from the Muslim community and somebody from lots of different cultures, and talk about that and kind of break down some of the barriers that some of our recruits have. You know, they might have been like me, growing up in a small town, never saw, you know, hardly any diversity, and it wasn't until I got to, you know, Ohio State and saw people of a lot of different backgrounds that I knew how important it was to make sure that we add that to our community in the Division of Police. I talk about it. You know, I cover a couple of those groups. I have a partner now. And so I cover a couple of those underrepresented group, but nonetheless, I am always trying to be as open to the possibilities of others, encouraging them to join the division. It is a welcoming place. It might not have been in the past, but it certainly is now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Chief Jacobs.
Andrew.
Thanks so much for being here today, and you too,
Certainly.
Cabot. My name's Andy Campbell. I have kind of a two-part question, and if you look at the map of Franklin County, the city covers a large swath of that, but there's municipalities and townships with their own police departments throughout. And I'm wondering, the first part, you know, how do you collaborate with all those municipal and township police departments? Part one. Part two is, what opportunities are there for us long-term? We heard the words consolidation and merging. Opportunities both for Columbus and perhaps for those municipal entities to save money and work with you in a larger and broader context.
Well, first of all, we get along very well with all of our other agencies. There are meetings that are held on a fairly regular basis with Franklin County chiefs, and so they get together and talk about common issues. I have met a number of them. I'm sure I'll meet a large number yet to be, but we have mutual aid agreements as well with many of other districts, so that we can help them out. More often than not, we're probably going to help them than they might help us, but that's just because of the number of resources that we have. But nonetheless, it's a very good cooperative relationship with all of our other police agencies. As far as consolidation, and that is a very big politician type of a thing, you know. But I can tell you that, you know, I've seen opportunities that other cities have taken with their county and their municipal agencies. Sometimes it works. It usually costs a lot of money, believe it or not. I just read about a couple of fire departments in, I believe, Oregon. They're talking about it, but to get there, you have to kind of go to the highest level of both union contracts. You know, this union won't accept this, and so, you know, they have to actually pay more sometimes to get there. So then it becomes, are you saving anything on resources, like, you know, the heavy equipment and those kinds of things? Mm-hmm. But you have to really look at the long-term cost to see whether or not that works. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I do think that, as I talked before, that we have to look at the cost of policing to see if there are some methods that we can use. You know, you hate to think that everybody's buying, you know, equipment that they only use sporadically, and everybody has one that gets used sporadically, instead of maybe being able to share one instead of having 10 that are infrequently used. Okay.
All right, good question there, Andy. Yes, sir. You have a question? Or are you just standing there to welcome everyone?
You have to excuse my speaking. I just got dentures.
Oh, well, you look good.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. My name is Bill Wagner, for friends. The American Math Society, the premier mathematical research institute, addresses me as William M. Wagner, and on occasion Professor William M. Wagner. Now, we all know the highly pejorative term that is directed at members of your profession in cases like the Rodney King case, you know. And it is my understanding that if a phenomenon is not known, it is immediately named upon discovery. Now, my question is, certainly with the numerous judicial orders that are imposed on the policemen, there certainly are situations in which the officers know darn well that the individual that they're is innocent, or at least worthy of consideration. My question is, I've never seen any term corresponding to that situation. What is the term that the officers use within your in organizations to describe such a situation. That is, when the officer knows damn well that the person they're apprehending is, quote, innocent or should be considered for.
Well, if I understand your question correctly, you're saying
I'm asking for an insider's
terminology versus probable cause. What would be the opposite?
No.
If an officer-
What corresponds to the terminology that are used against the police when in situations like the Rodney King case? Now we all know
illegal.
Oh
Yeah.
no, it's much worse than that. Police brutality.
Well, yeah, it depends on whether they use force
yes.
or not.
So my question is, what is the corresponding term that might be used to insiders in your profession when the officers are arresting someone they don't darn well is innocent?
Like I said, illegal. I don't know of any other term. I don't know of any other term.
Excuse me. Well, you'll have to excuse me. Soapboxes tickle my feet, and I tend to go into orbit under the circumstances. So,
All right,
Okay.
Professor, thank you. Thank you for your question.
I actually have a couple questions. How are the Crime Watch Facebook pages and things that are happening now? I know Clintonville has a Facebook page. And are you perpetuating those kind of things? And are they prevalent throughout the community, or is Clintonville kind of a rarity?
Well, I'm not totally familiar with it, but I do know that more and more community groups are using social media to stay in touch with each other.
Yeah.
I promised to learn how to use Facebook. My kids haven't taught me yet. They won't even let me look at their Facebook pages.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, you're not the only one, believe me.
Yeah, trust me.
They won't friend me or anything, so I'm going to learn how to use Facebook for the division. But the community groups I've been hearing from do use alerts. They use Facebook to get information out. You know, some people want to know about everything that's going on in their neighborhood, and that's a great way. It's an established media to be able to do that, and fairly simple for some people.
Yeah, well, I'm not real handy with it either, but it's been helpful. And I guess I have a second question, if I may. I'm always curious when I see a uniformed officer with a patrol car sort of babysitting street repair or something. Is that on extra time, or?
It is paid for by the construction company or whoever that might be. Those officers are considered to be special duty, and that construction company has hired that officer when they're off duty and pay them a special duty rate, and they're there for that purpose only. And so they're not routinely going to do a lot of other things. They're there for the purpose of protecting the workers or making sure the traffic is flowing around it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hi, Chief Jacobs.
Hi.
I'm Karen Huff. Thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
I'd like to know, as I hear the story of how you successively rose through the ranks and of your success, do you feel that there is an attribute that you possess that helped you to do that?
You know, it's all a testing process up until you get to the chief's rank, and then it's just a big interview thing. But the attribute that I have, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is I'm very curious. And so I ask a lot of questions, and I learn a lot by asking questions. I spent 5 years out in our dispatch center, which 911 and all that, and you know, the first week they start bombarding me with acronyms. You know, and people sat in the meetings and they just nodded their head, and I'm like, wait a second, what does that one mean? And you know, I'm pretty sure that the other people didn't know what they meant, but they didn't ask. I asked. So I like to understand, I like to know a lot, and so I ask a lot of questions. And I'm definitely one of those people, if you see a problem, fix it. You know, and one of the questions I always ask is, why are we doing this? And if you can't explain why, then we should either know or stop doing it. Or, you know, if you're doing it that way because we've always done it that way, time to figure out if we really need to do it that way or not. So I think that has been part of my success, is just getting to know a lot about a lot of things in the division. And that takes a lot of hard work. You know, people talk about my pay rate, my hourly rate, and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's really not what it is, because that's based on a 40-hour week.
Right. Yep.
I put in a lot more than 40 hours.
Yeah. Very good question.
There was an incident downtown recently where a police officer ended up shooting the criminal to stop his rampage, I suppose.
With knives.
Yes.
Right.
And so the reporter later said that it was taken care of by a female officer. And so I'm wondering what your reaction to that was.
First of all, I can't tell you how proud of her I am.
Was it you?
No. No, I haven't done any real police work for a long time.
Do you remember the surveillance video? I mean, we actually had on the air, and it showed her, and you know how she was responding, and it was quite brave. What I was impressed with was watching how she rushed in. You
Absolutely.
know, she jumped out of the car and she was on her way.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it was
And
impressive.
it's so representative of how some police work is, and she just proved that it can be done by women. And having the video evidence is good. Recognizing that she's a female is still okay with me, because it shows any doubters that and she's a very petite woman. I mean, she might be 5'3" or 4. I hope she's at least that much, you know. But I mean,
What's the regulation?
well, no, there's no regulation, but I don't want to slight her. But she's very petite. You know, you wouldn't look at her and say, oh, she's big, burly, and you know, all that kind of stuff. She doesn't have to be. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have to be. She did exactly what she needed to do.
So it's
And
a positive thing.
it's a very positive thing in my mind. It tells other women that somebody like her can do the job, and that's what you need reassurance of. I believe that a lot of women, I mean, they've told it to me, I could never do your job, because they doubt their prowess sometimes, you know, their strength. It doesn't take strength all the time. It takes, you know, smarts.
Yeah.
You know, it takes
reaction.
courage, and she showed that day. You know, and understand, I mean, 15 seconds before that, she's just driving down the street on routine patrol. And then it turns into a life and death situation. And even while she was, you know, confronting this guy, she fell down and was still able to continue to do what she was trained to do. And so I talked to her right afterwards and told her how proud of her I was. And it's a great thing that people across the country were able to see a female officer doing her job exactly the way it's supposed to be done.
How much time left have we got? About 3 minutes. Okay.
On a much lighter note, I just recently had a very good experience. I fortunately don't interact with policemen on the street very
Most
much.
people feel that way.
Yeah, no. But I was in an area that I wasn't familiar with in Columbus, and I inadvertently ran a stop sign, and the policeman pulled me over, and the first thing he said to me is, "Relax, I'm not going to give you a ticket." I was turning right, and the stop sign was pretty blocked by the trees, and he simply checked my driver's license and did the normal things you do. And I kind of feel that our policemen are ambassadors for our city, and I think that I've heard so many stories where somebody comes in to Columbus or any city to visit the city and maybe think about settling here or whatever, and they get a ticket and it kind of sours their day. Right. And I had a very good experience, and the policeman was very pleasant, very reassuring, and as I said, the first thing he said was, "You're going to get a ticket," and of course that changed my attitude very, very quickly.
Here you go, sir.
And do you, is that kind of a policy, or is that kind of I mean, if it's a non-threatening thing you do, is that something you teach? Because I thought he did, that's the first experience I've had like that, and I thought that he did an incredible job, and as I said, I drove away with a completely different attitude, and if I'd have been an out-of-town person coming into town, I would have had a positive experience.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. What I can say that we do teach our officers is that they're allowed to use discretion and common sense. And there is no quota. We don't say you have to write so many tickets every day. But they're allowed to use their common sense and discretion to decide whether or not the situation warrants a ticket. And using their abilities in that way is one of the things that we try to teach them. You know, it's difficult to train people during 6 months to be able to protect themselves so they can have a career in protecting you. But you also have to make sure that they understand that not everybody's a bad guy. Not everybody's out to get them. And yet they have to be ready for that 1 or 2 times that somebody might be out to get them. So, but we do try to teach them that they have the discretion to make a good common sense decision.
All right, you have the privilege of delivering the final question today. And
well, thank you. I just wanted to say how happy and how proud I am the fact that we do have a woman in this position now.
Thank you.
I also wanted to follow up to the person prior to the gentleman just spoke. I was in that office, the Attorney General's office, the day of that stabbing and shooting, and I was very glad that there was a woman there that knew what she was doing.
Absolutely.
And I was even more happy that there were video surveillance that had the opportunity to display what she did was the proper thing.
Correct.
And that it went out.
Correct.
My initial reason for getting up was to ask you a question about technology. I happen to be in the legal technology field. And I was wondering just how technology is playing a part in the, you know, in terms of police officers' lives and how that's sort of advancing things in terms of, you know, your career and as a whole for the police force.
There's pros and cons to our technology situation. I believe that the cameras are a great thing. I mean, having worked in internal affairs for 4 years, you know, we would get complaints on officers accusing them of all sorts of bad things, and then we'd watch the video and it never even happened. It was like, how did they come up with that story? So having cameras in our cars helps an awful lot, I think. You know, it gives us good evidence. And it keeps our officers with the understanding that they have to, you know, follow the rules.
they're being watched.
Absolutely.
Also.
And, you know, and at least we have our own cameras because there's cameras on somebody everywhere. And at least we have our side of the story now, too. And teaching them to understand that that's a good thing is important. But on the other side of technology, sometimes it has slowed us down. You know, I used to be able to take an offense report on pencil and paper in about 15, 20 minutes, and now, because of technology problems, it takes longer than that. And sometimes that's because of trying to get it through the bandwidth. Sometimes it's, you know, trying to get it through a busy, you know, network or whatever it might be. So we have to solve some of those problems, but I believe that technology is a way that we can multiply our force. And we need to continue to look at it.
Are there laptops and things of that nature in the squad cars?
There are, and sometimes that's the problem.
Understood.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of technology sitting in that car. There's probably $10,000 to $15,000 worth of technology in every single cruiser that you see out there.
Do they get special training while they're going through?
They do. They do. Like, we're transitioning over to taking our accident reports from cars crashing electronically instead of handwritten, and that's taking a lot of training, and it's taking a lot of patience because it's not easy.
Understood. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Chief, it's, you said a couple times during your presentation that it's all about trust, and I think public servants like yourself inspire the confidence to give us that kind of trust. So thank you. Really well done. Before you leave today, be sure to consider coming back next week for Tales of Shale Part 2. And we invite you to continue the conversation with the chief, if she can stick around, for coffee and cookies out in the lobby. But before you go, let me once more thank the athletic club, Lisa, Antolino, the president, and Paul Kroll, the general manager. Thank you very much. And finally, Cabot and Chief Jacobs, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.